The chair back over to Senator Pugh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, Senate Bill 1598 and Senate Bill 1905 are being laid over at the request of the authors. Before we get to the next agenda item, members, if you'll allow me the indulgence, I just want to give you a little history. We, several years ago, tried to tackle accreditation. I had met with a number of school districts, and they showed me the amount of paperwork that they were being asked to undergo year after year after year in order to go through the exact same accreditation process. I know large districts, it's probably 2 to 3 FTEs a year. And I've seen the paperwork, and if you haven't, I would encourage you to do so. Go ask your school district what that paperwork looks like, and ask them how easy it is to then upload all of that information into a really clunky software tool where every school district can use a different one, and there's no requirement from the State Department, and it's time-consuming. I never thought I'd be in this building having people defend bureaucracy. I tried to take accreditation and completely change that process from the previous administration. And a number of you who were here during that time actually supported that legislation, and we got it to the House. And we got it to the House, and the Hofmeister administration effectively killed that legislation because they didn't want to lose the power of accreditation. And so I worry that we're justifying bureaucracy when it meets our needs and not when it doesn't. And so we'll fight the DOJ being weaponized against our citizens. We'll fight the IRS being weaponized against our citizens. We'll fight Border Patrol, who capriciously decides when to fulfill their legal responsibility according to law and Constitution. But if we happen to like the agency, then we just say, well, but that's okay, we can weaponize this agency. And I just think, I've always tried to stand on solid policy and principle, and I just think that's a dangerous way for us to do business. And so if we're for bureaucracy and overcoming our citizens with paperwork and process and weaponizing it when they don't do exactly something we want, that's fine. I want to remind this committee what we've accomplished in what is now my 4th year as this chair. We've highlighted some of them. We did open transfer. Thank you for that, because I am convinced it's the right policy, and I'm convinced it can go further. You know that I believe in local control, so much so I'd like school board reform. And this committee has passed school board reform 3 years running. We've passed school board reform, because I think it's such an important role at the local level that we need higher turnout. And I think aligning and I know there's disagreement on this, but I think aligning those calendars, I think just makes more sense to make sure that it's more reflective and representative of the community at large. So that if you have a district like mine that's, kind of a large community with one school district, you don't just have maybe a couple hundred or 1,000 people, determine a really important part of our everyday lives if you have kids, or a really important part of your community. I worked with Senator Hamilton last year, and I thought we passed a really good bill that had to deal with books in schools and libraries. That was very good. It was thoughtful. We brought a lot of people to the table. And that bill passed out of this committee and passed off our floor and was sent to our brothers and sisters over in the House. And that bill was butchered and neutered and sent back to us in an unrecognizable form that was no longer, a good piece of legislation dealing with books or dealing with libraries, things that I know a lot of you are concerned with. We've done maternity leave and teacher pay. We've done things to ensure accountability. You know that I want flat tuition, no tuition increases. I want that. And I want to move to at-risk funding for higher education and align that to our workforce goals and the needs of our economy. You have done all of that. Those are, I think, good, small government conservative ways to approach education policy. And we've tried, not always, to do it in a bipartisan manner. There's times we just have ideological differences with our Democrats on this committee, and I welcome that. I think that's awesome. It's a part of the way this process should work. I just wanted to remind the committee that we've done a lot of good conservative things, but unfortunately I've been called a lot of non-conservative things. Just because I have a piece of legislation that thinks there's maybe a better way for us to govern, and just a better piece of policy. And I appreciate everyone's feedback. I do. If you're listening, if you're here, and you wrote me, and it wasn't nasty, thank you. I welcome that feedback. I do. But more importantly, here's what I'll end with. You've heard me say many times I'm very concerned with how we treat each other and the way we talk to each other and the rhetoric in this building. And I went home last Friday and I texted one of my colleagues and I said, oh my goodness, we're broken. The state's broken. We need some Jesus. I don't say that flippantly. I don't use my faith in that way. It's a spiritual weapon. I don't use it as a political weapon. And I think if Jesus were here today, where would he go? And I highly doubt he'd come to this building. I think he'd be on the front steps, probably washing somebody's feet. I think he'd probably walk down Lincoln Boulevard and step into the OU Children's Hospital and probably pray with those who are hurting. And I think he'd probably wander into the city and he'd show people that he loved them. And he'd do it in a way that the Greek word is agape, which is a love we'll never understand. So I'm a little bit frustrated with what the conversation has been around this legislation, because all I was trying to do is have a really solid policy debate about is there an agency that's better aligned to fulfill the mission of accountability? And we've got a director that's a data scientist that's asking to take on more responsibility and asking to really implement the mission of OEQA, which is educational accountability and quality. And I can't think of an agency that's better prepared, given the director and given where her vision of where she wants to take her agency, than to take a process that I think has been broken for a long time and to give it to that agency. But I hear you, and I hear your feedback. And Ronald Reagan once said in his first debate, "Sir, when presented with the facts, I reserve the right to change my mind." So committee members, I will lay over Senate Bill 520 and we're adjourned.